Emotions should be indicators, not dictators. Emotions should be the light on our dashboard that lets us know we're low on fuel or we have low tire pressure.
Welcome to the Innovative Church Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Bryant. In every episode, we bring in guests who will inspire, encourage you to be more effective in your mission field. On today's episode of the Innovative Church Leaders Podcast, I have with me Robby Emery. How are you doing, Robbie?
Doing great, Eric. Thanks for having me on today.
Well, it's great to meet you. I've heard so many great things about you. Our senior pastor, Carlos Ortiz, here at Gateway in Austin, Matt McHugh. We're putting on an event where you're coming to be the headlining speaker, our men's gathering, May 31st, 2025. We're so excited to have you. But I wanted to get to hear your story a little bit, not only for the men that are part of my church, but for other church leaders. Just knowing what I do about you, you are a church planner. You've been in ministry for 25 years. Perhaps more recently, your claim to fame, so to speak, is the chaplain of the Michigan Wolverines, which won a national championship, saw many student athletes and coaches coming to faith. Maybe just share a little bit about what you're doing now. What excites you about following Jesus in the current way he's got you serving?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Eric. And it has been a great journey. Still with the Michigan football program. This was my 10th season coming up, and the expectation, excitement of what this 10th season is going to bring is, man, I can't wait. So pumped for it. But these past couple years, working with now our head football coach, Sharon Moore, the university has asked me to create my own position within the program. So leading up to now, I was an advisor. I was Coach Jim Harbaugh's assistant for a few years. And when he went out to LA to start working for the Chargers as their head football coach, they asked me to create a job, which is pretty cool for a public university to ask me to do that. And I was like, yes, I would love to create it. And all I did was just take what I do for the university's football team, and I just put it into a job description. And so now I'm the director of character development. But I'm just Pastor Robbie to everybody in the building. So just being a pastor to people who are not, they don't get to go to church on Sunday because of their schedule. So I just bring church to them Monday through Saturday.
That's beautiful. Well, talk a little bit about character development. How do you help these young men become the person God created them to be? What are some of the ways you're investing in these guys?
Well, one of the ways is I definitely encourage them to help them with your emotions, because emotions should be indicators, not dictators. Emotions should be the light on our dashboard that lets us know we're low on fuel or we have low tire pressure. And I remind the boys of that. So they'll come see me, and just like your car, you may have a quarter tank, you may have the amber lights on and you're really low on fuel, or you may be 3/4 of tanks. Depending on where they are, depends on how much time they need with me. It may be just a fist bump, a word of encouragement, or it may be 20 minutes to let's navigate this together emotionally, spiritually, physically, relationally. And it's really just a process of that, and having an understanding of it, knowing that they may only need a couple minutes and it's okay on my side. They just need a little bit of gas, or they need a ton to get through the rest of the day. And as a leader, I think we all have to be very sensitive to that, because sometimes we fuel people up the same manner every time, and they don't need all that. They just need a little bit. And we got to know where the fine line is between, because when you start overfilling your own gas tank or your own tire, it puts it in danger. It actually becomes, you got gas all over your car, you got an overinflated tire. And as leaders, we need to understand there's a balance. I don't have to put it all out there at once. And another reason why I've been able to be at a public university doing what I do is, as we talked about earlier, Eric, is I have teenage kids, and I always tell them to watch their tone, right? Watch your tone. What you're saying is not wrong, but the way you're saying it is. And I think as leaders, we have the wrong tone. We're the bullhorn guy standing on the corner screaming, Jesus saves. And that's true, but maybe the way he's doing it's wrong and people are turned off by it. And so when we're in public settings, we have to make sure that the tone is right, and we have to be patient. I got 3.5, 4 years with these guys. I'm in it for the long haul. I'm gonna navigate them as they're gonna grow in their knowledge of nutrition. They're gonna grow in their speed and their strength and their knowledge in the classroom. that's going to be their faith journey too. And I'm going to be very patient, and I'm going to get them to the place where, hey, I'm going to say yes to Jesus. I'm going to get water baptized. And over 9 seasons, over 300 players and coaches have given their life to Christ, and 83 have been water baptized.
That's beautiful. That's amazing. Well, I love that imagery of, not overfilling the tank, so to speak. And a lot of times, I think if we're not careful as pastors, we kind of see ourselves as the one bringing the wisdom. But the more we can get our folks, the ones we're investing in, to demonstrate that wisdom, live out that wisdom, and share that wisdom with others. It's almost like they need to expend some energy as well, living it out, sharing it with others, just as they're receiving it from us. I think that's just a really helpful image.
Well, the other thing, Eric, just for everyone listening, just to take it one step further, is that the reason why I use those two images really is that you would never get rid of the entire vehicle because of low fuel. You would never get rid of it because of a low tire. You would never do that. And we have a lot of people who have immature emotions, and they think because they're low on fuel, maybe it's depression, anxiety, all the stuff that people face, they end up taking their own lives, or they end up doing things drastically. And what I want to do is I want to educate people. No, just because you made a mistake or just because you feel low doesn't mean you get rid of the entire thing. You just have to slow down. You have to stop. And they don't realize that. That's, what you cannot do to your car if it has low fuel or low tire pressure. You can't fill them up while you're driving down the road. And people are trying to fill up their life while still going at the same pace, the same energy, driving down the road, and they're wondering why, what's going on? How come I can't get back to where I was? Or how come I can't get to this place of positivity or energy or all these things? Well, you have to stop. You have to pull over.
Yeah.
We have a lot of pastors who are burning out because they're not stopping or pulling over, not taking the time to fuel themselves up. Hopefully, I'm going to bring some of that to this weekend at the men's conference and share a little bit about that to the person that's coming. I think to be a better father, a better husband, better leader in your home, a leader at work, there's some little things that we can do, I think will really add value to you and then ultimately add value to others.
I love that. Yeah, I think that's such a great word of wisdom. I would love for you to just talk for a moment about this journey towards becoming a chaplain. Like, how did you go from a church planner, which is hard in and of itself? I mean, sure, a lot of wisdom gained in serving young singles and couples and families. What was the transition into this ministry, or how are you invited to do both?
That's a great question. We lived in Houston. It's where we came in contact with Carlos, and just through some as youth pastors and going to different youth events. And when we moved back to Michigan, where we grew up in 2016, we're coming home to start a church. And coming home to start a church, we moved home in May. And in May of that year, I got a call from a friend of mine who was in Houston, said, hey, there is a quarterback from the University of Houston who just transferred to Michigan. And he doesn't know anybody there. And he was the third string quarterback at the time, and he just needs a big brother and someone to love on him, do Bible studies with him. So yeah, absolutely. I got that. And so like May and June of 2016, just started doing Bible studies with him. And then he invited his players and some interns, and it just kind of turned into this thing. Well, this is in Ann Arbor, and I started a church near Detroit, which is about 45 minutes to an hour away. So I'm going back and forth trying to build a church, and I haven't even launched it yet, trying to start that and still doing Bible studies. And God was just doing something very unique in what we were doing. So a few months later, it was August of 2016, the players that I've been doing Bible studies with wanted to introduce me to Coach Harbaugh. And we were at what's called Barbecue at the Big House. It's a big recruiting event. And it was the setup to the beginning of fall camp, which is what we call the submarine, where the players go away for 3 weeks and they just get dialed in right before the season begins. And so introduced me to Coach Harbaugh at the end of the day. Hey, Coach, this is Robbie. He's starting a church, but we would love for him to speak at our chapel. He's like, all right, Robbie, I'd love for you to speak at our chapel. Which one do you want to do? And I smiled at him. I said, I want to do the first one. I think he loved the eagerness or the zeal that I had. And he said, well, absolutely. The first one's this Sunday. We didn't have our church open yet, so Sunday was going to work at 10 a.m. So I live an hour away from Ann Arbor. I get up Sunday morning at 5 a.m. I leave my house at 6 a.m. because I I didn't want to run out of gas. I didn't want to have a flat tire. I didn't want to, something wrong happen, an accident, take me long. I want to make sure I was there in time. So I'm there by 7 a.m., waiting around for 3 hours, and see coach. He says, "Hey, Rob, we're going to start. The players will all be in there together." I'm like, "All of them?" I thought chapel would be optional. He says, "What I'm going to do is I'll have my brother Tom Crean speak first, and then you'll speak right after him." Well, Tom Crean, his brother-in-law, at the time was the coach of the Indiana Hoosiers, the basketball team.
Right. Yeah.
And so I'm like, "All right, it's cool. Tom's going to speak, then I'll speak." So everyone's in the room. It's amazing. And Tom begins to speak. He's a great communicator, and he's very energetic. It was awesome. I enjoyed it being in there. But 30 minutes go by. There's only an hour block of time. And if you know anything about football or D1 sports or even in NFL, that hour is all you got, because there's other things stacked up against it, and you don't go past that time. You start on time or a little early. And my man, Coach Tom Crean, he's preaching, if you will, and he's going 30 minutes. 45 minutes, I text my wife. I said, he is not landing this plane anytime soon. Right about the 55-minute mark, Coach Harbaugh comes up. "Thank you, Tom, for being here." Dismisses everybody. So I told my wife, missed my opportunity to speak. And we're walking out. And Coach Harbaugh says, "Robbie, man, I'm really sorry about that. And my brother-in-law is a great speaker. It just went a little long." And I said, "That's okay, Coach. I really thank you for the opportunity." And he looked at me. He said, "Robbie, if there's anything I can do for you in the future, please let me know." I said, "Oh, well, Coach, there is one thing." He said, "What's that?" I said, "I would love to do the next chapel." I said, "I would love to do chapel." And he said, "Which one?" And I said, all of them. And the rest is pretty much history. He said, "Well, come on." And so I started doing the chapel services. It was a little kind of, we're trying to, little nuances in the first. And then he just started. I was faithful to come into practice. In fact, in 2018, I was at a practice where he asked me to be, because the guys kind of need a little guidance and practice and stuff. And he said, I was there in summer, August, and the guys would drink Gatorade, water bottles, and just throw them on the ground. It wasn't, trash cans nearby. And then they would run out of the field. So I'm standing around. There's tons of water bottles and Gatorade bottles around. I just start picking them up, throwing them away. And I did that for several days every time I do it. And I didn't know Coach Harbaugh was watching one day, but he stopped everybody. He said, "Hey," he called over the guy who hires people. He says, "Hey, if this guy who doesn't make any money, who's not hired by us, is going to do this, and this is not his job, start paying him for being here." And so that opened up to where I started getting paid by the university. And then one day it evolved to a time where he said, "Well, I really like for you to be my assistant." And I started laughing. I said, "I don't even know what that means." I said, "But I have to ask my wife first if I can do this." And I did. Asked my wife, asked a few other of my leaders in my life. And they said, "You got to do this. You have to be around this guy, help him." And for the next, 2.5, 3 years, I just was his pastor.
Wow. And in that window is when you won the national championship, if I remember right.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, in many ways, your story is such a beautiful example of just being faithful in little things, looking for opportunities to step in, to be proactive. I'd love to, perhaps for our last question, which, by the way, for anyone interested, go to robbyemery.com. Excited to give away copies of your book to those who listen to my podcast at ericbryant.org. Sign up for the newsletter. Your book is called Pick Me. And I would love for you just to share a little bit with us about the story of belonging that book really represents.
It's, it came from the book is my journey at Michigan and my time there, and stories that I've told people, and sermons that I've preached, and stories that I've picked up along the way. And the book is based on all of that together. So it's not a football book. It's not a sports book. I'm a storyteller. And in the story I'm telling is we live in this pick me culture, right? We do. We hope the chair will turn around and they'll invite me on their team and I can win a singing competition. We hope at the end of the day we get a rose and that someday I'll find my soulmate. We live in a pick me culture. We're all the proverbial middle schooler walking around with our lunch tray, hoping somebody will invite us to sit next to them, hoping we find a place to fit in. And so all that begins with us, right? All that begins with us. For me to see value in other people, I first must value myself. Even when Jesus was asked the question, what's the greatest commandment in all the law? Love the Lord your God with all your heart. The second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. We have a lot of people who just don't love themselves. A lot of people who just don't really like who they are. And whether you're a D1 football college athlete or you're just a freshman, going to high school, or you're a business leader trying to add value to other people, well, you got to first start with yourself. When you start doing that, then you start seeing the value of other people. It's a little acronym I came up with. It's called DIG, D-I-G. And it's what you have to do is you have to dig for individual gold. You have to go mine that in other people. It doesn't come out easy. It's not something that we find right away. And most people want to find something instantly, want to find value in other people instantly, but it takes time. And there's a word I break down. It's called intimacy. And really, intimacy is into me, I see. And all relationships should be intimate. All of them. Casual relationships at work, the only way for them to be strong is they have to be intimate. And what we don't do is we don't look inside ourselves because we don't like what's inside ourselves. And so if I'm ever going to build a strong relationship, I have to be okay with who I am. So this is a development part. This is like, hey, this is seeing the value of yourself. This is also putting some disciplines in your life to increase that value. And then it's ultimately how I treat other people and make sure that I understand that they're wanting to belong too, just like I want to belong. And I think it'd be really helpful to a lot of people. And to all the pastors listening, there's a lot of good sermons in there, not just because I wrote them, but I think it'll be helpful to you along the way, because we're all looking for those little nuggets that we can use to make what we're doing communicate better. I think it'd be very helpful to you as well. So it's a book for everybody, and it's really unique.
Great. And I'm excited for our guys to hear you here in just a couple weeks in Austin, Texas. Robbie, thank you for spending some time with us. Keep up your great work investing in the future. We're so grateful for you.
It's an honor. I will invest in the future. Thank you for having me on, Eric. I'm looking forward to hanging out with everybody in just a few days.
Thanks for joining us for the Innovative Church Leaders Podcast. Go to my website, ericbryant.org, for my newsletter and free resources.